Welcome to the Acronym Podcast, the only B2B marketing podcast where we don't care about CPLs, MQLs, and SQLs, and instead I'm going to be sitting down with the industry's top thought leaders, business owners, and entrepreneurs to uncover how they were able to build the confidence to make the leap into entrepreneurship and ultimately break free of those golden handcuffs. I'll also be discussing my own story, scaling a multiple six-figure marketing agency in under 12 months, and hope to be able to inspire the next generation of digital marketers to make that leap into entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Chris Roach. In today's episode, I'm joined by CEO and founder Tim Hyde of TWH Media. We're going to discuss how he made that leap into entrepreneurship, having worked under CEOs such as Steven Bartlett, and also why he decided a Lamborghini was a good investment. I'll see you in the episode. Hey Tim, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. Looking forward to hearing about your story and the background on TWH Media.
Yeah, thanks for having us, dude. Always nice to see you. It's been a little while. Yeah, great to catch up and excited to have a conversation.
And I will say you're our first English guest as well, so you're the first guest coming from the other side of the pond as well, which is always nice.
Amazing. I'll try and speak slowly. I have a bad habit of getting too excited, and my Mancunian accent can get in the way for an American audience. So I'll do my best to keep my feet on the ground.
Yeah, that's a skill that it took me probably about 2 years to learn when I first obviously moved over here, was I really have to slow it down when I'm talking. I found that not only in college, but then getting into sales and trying to close deals, that if I get excited, I talk fast and people tend not to understand me anymore.
Oh, 100%.
So I got to ask, do I sound American to you now? Obviously, 10 years I've been here now. Am I still sounding English or to an English person?
You've still got your same voice, but there's defo like an American twang. I would say 70-30. Like, I would still say you come from the UK, but there is like those little twangs and little words that I think creep in. But you're still a Brit at heart.
Yeah, everybody here thinks I'm Australian, so it's kind of interesting, like how the blend. Like literally every American I've ever met is like, oh, like where in Australia are you from? I'm like, dude, not even close. Like so far, couldn't be literally further from where I'm from.
That's funny.
But hey, let's jump into it then. So TWH Media. What is TWH Media? What kind of services do you offer?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been going for just under 6 years now. Specializes in sort of social media acquisition strategy, a little bit of brand strategy, but I think the day-to-day, what I spend most of my time doing is running Facebook ads for lots of different brands. Run it from the D2C space to FMCG to lead gen for sort of property clients. My specialist really is spending money on Facebook and a little bit of TikTok as well.
Interesting that you specialize exclusively on Facebook, and is that because of the audiences and the clients that you've worked with? Obviously, a lot of the agency owners that have come on here in the past have been kind of more in that B2B space, so it's very much Google Ads, LinkedIn, and then Facebook is always kind of that third option. Are you still seeing, profitable campaigns with Facebook?
Oh, without a doubt. I think for higher AOV products and items and services, I think Facebook still is the king in the space. Obviously post iOS 14, a lot of channels have really struggled with that attribution piece of the pie. However, Facebook, I think from a targeting perspective, 2 billion users that they have from an MAU perspective does give you a hell of a lot of freedom to obviously target people still at a fairly granular nature. And obviously if you get that kind of combination of great offer, great hook, good advertising, you can do things pretty well on that channel still.
Let's jump back into your career then. You didn't start off by, deciding you wanted to, launch an agency from square one. You actually took a very interesting path in the fact that you didn't go to university. You decided to go straight into the workforce. So what age was that? Was that 16, 18?
18. So in the UK, we have what are called sort of A-levels, which is like the exams you do pre-university/college. I really wanted to be a journalist, so I'm massively into sport, big Liverpool fan, cricket fan, golf fan, big Patriots fan, NBA fan, Celtics fan. So like I love all sport really. I'm pretty obsessive, and so getting into sort of sports journalism was what I was sort of passionate about at that age. I did my NCTJs, so like your national journalism exams, and then my first job was at the Lad Bible, which is like a big media publisher. We were really big on Facebook, and that kind of got me into that sort of social media realm. Really got to sort of understand how powerful social media was, to be honest, how, you could get your message in front of people, the crazy growth that was occurring at the time. And I think just the excitement that came with that, we were pioneering stuff, we were pushing the boundaries. And I think being part of a team that's really doing that is really exciting and really gets you up in the morning. And then from there, moved on to an agency called Social Chain, which was at one point, I think, the biggest social media marketing agency in Europe. And again, had a lot of fun there, and sort of moved from sort of being more a writer, a creator, focused on the sort of generic social media side, to actually being, a marketer and understanding how you can sort of utilize the power of social media to usually either drive growth or drive sales.
And making that jump from journalism into social media marketing agency, what was your role when you first started out? Was that straight into like managing ad campaigns? Was that creating content, more of the copywriting side of things?
It was a bit of everything, actually. I think because we were such a small and new company, you could really, borrow out a role for yourself. So I was hired, we were running meme accounts, which obviously we ran a lot of social media campaigns through. So you sort of had that exciting kind of content side to it, which was really cool and a lot of fun. And you sort of got that dopamine kick from watching accounts go viral and, driving kind of growth on the social media side. But at the same time, it was also then building campaigns through those, actual social media pages. So integrating what kind of content would get signed off from a brand, how you could integrate that into like a proper kind of marketing campaign. And I think, I wasn't necessarily always the best writer, certainly in like a journalistic sense, but I always thought I was quite good at like identifying the right angles, identifying the right sort of stories or what people would find interesting. And that really, really helped me sort of as soon as I got into the sort of marketing realm, because it was, what is that user going to find interesting? What aspects of a product is that person going to actually resonate with? How can you sell more of a lifestyle rather than just selling a piece of paper, whatever it is? And that really, really helped me, because I had already been looking at the world in that kind of way from a journalism background. And then, you supercharge that with an amazing team and the opportunity to work with some great clients. And the period at Social Chain was a hell of a lot of fun.
Got you. That's awesome. And then for those that don't know Social Chain, I think those that were listening will know the CEO from Social Chain. So can you talk a little bit about, who you worked with and what that experience was like?
Yeah, so Steve Bartlett is now definitely in the UK, certainly a celebrity, opened up an office in New York as well, and has a bit of a presence over there, has, I think, the biggest podcast in Europe, and is still, one of my sort of close mates. But, phenomenal entrepreneur, phenomenal guy, a phenomenal friend. And, we were kind of all, certainly the first sort of 20 or so of us we're very lucky to sort of be in front of that, ambition, that knowledge, helping each other kind of grow, reading self-help books, pushing each other to improve on campaigns. And so Social Chain, I think, went from 11 to, 750 as a group within sort of 5 or 6 years, and listed on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, following a kind of reverse IPO, which is a more technical term. But we work for a lot of the biggest brands in the world, Puma, Nike, Adidas, Amazon, Google, Coca-Cola, Warner. We did Sinister releases. We worked for Boohoo, Pretty Little Thing. We did so many cool things on a brand level, and really were able to sort of push the boundaries. And then we had the sort of top 9 branded live streams of all time at one point, which was definitely a cool period.
That's awesome. So at that point, obviously it must feel like you're kind of almost on top of the world and kind of at the peak of your career. I mean, working with this agency that's, scaling, astronomically. Obviously Steven has gone on now to do other things and has his podcast, and obviously now has just launched his own VC fund, I believe. So, he's kind of gone on with that. So, when you're in that position, what made you then decide, I love what I'm doing, but I'm going to now break out on my own and kind of start from zero?
Yeah, so there was a little stop off on my journey before sort of jumping out on my own. So when I was 21, I got asked to look after a third of an agency globally. So it's called Agency TK, and I was between Leeds, London and Los Angeles. And so if anyone knows much about UK weather, it's not great. And the prospect of getting to spend some time in some sunshine was pretty appealing. And so I was in charge of TV, radio, SEO, PPC, and social media. And the reason why I sort of jumped at that role was just, a pay rise and kind of the ambition to look after teams in different locations, but one of the things I thought we did at Social Chain, we were really good at that, like brand awareness, at virality, at getting awareness and sort of driving touch points very high up on the funnel for businesses. But what we weren't as good at was actually driving sales. And I think, for me, as someone that's always been pretty business minded and pretty pragmatic, is if you're a business and you invest in marketing, you want to get a return from that. You understand that that might not be overnight, and that might not be within a 28-day period, but you're seeing marketing as a continual investment in yourself and a brand. And I think for me, it was about identifying channels that also, built the brand and generated awareness, but also sort of generated a clearer and more trackable ROI. And that's how I kind of got into Facebook advertising sort of then. And then, that was it. So I was working for agency TK. They broke a few promises, and I tell this story on stage quite a lot when I'm sort of speaking all over the world, and I had the most obvious business case and reason to start a new business. So I'd just been screwed over. I was going to earn more money. I was going to work less. I had clients that literally had said, "We want to work with you, just you," and I was still absolutely petrified. And until that point, I never considered myself entrepreneurial at all whatsoever. I wasn't that kid in the playground selling sweets. I wasn't, this guy that wanted to be the CEO of a business. And it was just that logical next step for me. It was going to create a better life for me. It was going to up my earnings significantly. I was going to have a better work-life balance. Like, it literally checked every box. And honestly, I was still umming and ahhing. Should I do it? I was really, really scared. And thankfully I took the leap and have never looked back.
Why do you think you were so scared to make that leap, knowing that the financial, obviously you have the upside, it's not guaranteed, but why were you so scared looking back to kind of make that jump? Was it a confidence thing? Was it imposter syndrome? Was it just the fear of the unknown?
I think probably the fear of unknown, and just the fact that, the floor and the downside is way lower. You can sink money into a project, your earnings can go from being really good to zero overnight. And I'd never run a business, no one in my family was running a business, so I didn't have those kind of skills or anyone close to me to have those skills other than, kind of colleagues in both Lab Bible and Social Chain. So I think it was, the unknown and the kind of risk of it all. And you kind of read online and, the statistics for startups certainly aren't great. And I was definitely told that. So I think it was all those things kind of put together. I'd just never done it before, but definitely the best decision I've ever made.
I think that's a common trait is, the fear of the unknown with that is being able to make that leap into kind of that entrepreneurship. I'm curious, when you say you have clients that were kind of knocking down your door at this point, ready to work with you, can you talk about the number of clients, kind of the, I guess, forecasted even monthly or yearly revenue from that to where you felt comfortable making that leap? And it can be ballpark figures just to kind of get an idea of like where your mind was to make the jump into entrepreneurship.
Yeah, so it was initial 3 clients. So just while I was on sort of gardening leave between Social Chain and working for agency TK, I actually got flown out to Singapore to work with a client, just privately, which was an amazing opportunity. And as part of that, there was a crowdfunding campaign that did really, really well. And so I got to sort of work with this brand very closely. They sort of had expressed an interest of just working with me kind of personally. And then within that team, there was also another client which became my first agency client called PNW Components, and someone that I actually worked with for, I think, 6 years, literally until, I think, last April. That was it. It was that one relationship led to 3 clients. I think it led to about, probably $15,000 a month in income, which is a 21-year-old in the UK. Average salary is $35,000 a year. Our taxes, thankfully, are way lower, and we don't have to pay health insurance. So, average salary in the UK is not a lot at all. And it was a case of like, wow, I'm gonna, do way better. Yeah. It was literally a no-brainer. And also it was people that I knew and was excited to work with. So, but as you say, I was still really, really nervous and setting up the business, getting getting VAT registered, incorporating the business, getting an accountant. Yeah. What I tend to say to people that are thinking about going out on their own, none of these things are difficult. There's just a lot of things and little steps you have to do all at once. It's probably similar to setting up a Google campaign, a LinkedIn campaign, a Facebook campaign. If you've never done it before, none of those steps or clicks are particularly difficult. It's just the order that you do them in, the fact that you need to, double check and kind of go through them. And then, as you run a business, the longer it goes on, you get better at cash flow management, putting aside your bills for tax, understanding what's the best way to pay yourself and how efficient you should be. All those things are, again, not rocket science. You can probably read in a book, but until you go through them, I definitely didn't feel comfortable. So that first year definitely was a steep learning curve, but I definitely was, playing life on easy mode. I was, living at home. I was earning, 3 times more than the average UK kind of income. I had it very cushy, and also I was very fortunate. I had a really good reputation, and because of the businesses that I'd worked at, I worked really hard. I had good references, and still hopefully do have to this day, and that's carried itself for a long time. The impression that you leave on people has generated business way off into the future that you never thought it might have done.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and that's something that I advise a lot of marketing agency owners when they're looking at starting off. Is it's very easy to find a client. I believe to go and find a client, 2 or 3 clients when you're first starting off is not the difficult part. It's keeping those clients and maintaining a positive reputation with them, and that's where, again, being very, very selective at the beginning. Like, if you don't have this background, this reputation, clients that are knocking down your door, which a lot of marketers don't have when they first start. I know I didn't have that when I first started. I had to go and be kind of proactive with that. You have to really understand what a good client can do for you, but also what a bad client, the risk you take with that. So you have to be very, very selective when you start off. And if you've just been laid off, if you're just kind of jumped into it and you don't have guaranteed income right now, it's very, very difficult to turn away business when you're first starting off. Have you had any examples of that where people have come to you that just haven't been a good fit and you're kind of, almost guilt-edged trying to say, yeah, I can't work with you, unfortunately?
Loads. Happens all the time, and I think being honest, it also depends on the scenario and the timing of when they contact you. I think if I go back to probably midway 2021, I was doing really, really well. I had a record year after sort of the scare of that COVID provided, and there was a load of business that I turned down. 1, for capacity reasons, and 2, stuff just didn't interest me. Just really didn't interest me. You flip back to sort of maybe Q2 last year in 2022 where, bad bounce of the ball, a couple of clients didn't necessarily raise the capital they thought they were, budgets were cut a little bit. Some events also my fault as well, but a lot of external circumstances created that scenario. I'm sure I would have taken on business that I potentially shouldn't have, just because you think, I want to bump my numbers a little bit. So yeah, every single agency I've ever spoke to goes through this, bad clients or clients that don't pay on time or clients that all, massive scope creep. It is part of the business. But yeah, I think it's always a balance, and at the end of the day, I personally think you have to make it on a case by case basis. It's, if you're really, really struggling, there's no chance you're going to turn down business. But at the same time, if you are in a good groove, if you've got great momentum, if you've got long-standing relationships, absolutely. If someone's going to affect your mental health, if someone's going to take up way more time and going to massively, creep on that scope, is going to cause you a load of headaches, it's not worth it. But again,
Absolutely.
it's very easy to say here on a podcast when you're running the finances with a CFO. I'm sure they have something different to say.
We had a similar experience recently. We turned away a client. They were about a $10,000 a month client, and it was a large client for us. And turning that away was very, very difficult. And to be honest, I don't know if I would have done it if I hadn't have just gone on literally 4 or 5 podcasts talking about how when you have a red flag client, you can't take them. It's more damage than it's going to be. And we're looking to grow quite aggressively this year. Like, we're just kind of getting into our second year. We're about 18 months into starting the business, and we have big growth goals for 2023. And I'm thinking, as a $10,000 a month client, like, they would be a perfect fit for kind of the next level that we want to hit with that. And I've just gone on all these talks talking about how you have to say no, and I'm sitting there thinking, I've got every red flag under the sun with these right now. Like, I have to turn it away. Next month we closed 3 new clients, and it was just like the epiphany of, right, now you know why you make those decisions. But it's very, very difficult to do when you're first starting off. It's terrifying.
Yeah, it's terrifying, and don't beat yourself up if you do that. Like, again, everyone does it. It's everyone kind of goes through it. But yeah, I think your story there is perfect about good things do tend to come to people when you consistently make the right decisions that you believe in. You have your North Star. You have that list of things that you do not or try not to compromise on. Eventually, you're going to get the break that you deserve.
So you alluded to in a previous statement, kind of talked about, after COVID, you had your best year. Does that mean the year of COVID wasn't a great year?
It was okay. I think as a year, it probably ended up pretty good. Okay. It was simply when COVID hit, I think I lost about 50% of my business overnight. And it was just people paused. Marketing budgets got slashed. Other agencies that I collaborate with or get whitelisted by went, right, we need to pause. What are we doing? And it was a really difficult situation because no one knew what was going to happen. No one from a budget perspective knew what was going to happen. And everyone kind of just had to go, let's take stock. Everyone was basically cutting ties and saving money where they could. And yeah, that was a really, really scary period in that sort of March and April. But from there, I persevered, I worked hard, a bit more outbound, all those sorts of things. And obviously e-commerce as a vertical boomed. And, that's something that I've done a hell of a lot of. And obviously working remotely and plugging into teams all over the US, all over the world, certainly Europe, is something that I was very used to. Zoom meetings, Hangouts meetings, Teams meetings, I'm very used to, and I'm very used to sort of operating in that environment. So there were a lot of things that then sort of ended up benefiting me quite a lot because I was used to them and had a little bit of an advantage, and also was probably a little cheaper than some of these bigger agencies that had redundant offices in London, New York, LA, places like that. And so yeah, it was just really scary for probably about a month, and from there, you kind of dust yourself off, you carry on, you stay consistent, and yeah, it ended up being a pretty solid year in the end. But yeah, that first month was pretty scary.
Yeah, I can imagine. I remember. So I was still running the software development agency, and I remember I probably had $1 million in contracts out at the time, and they all paused. And I remember thinking, shit, this is going to be, and it took about 30 to 45 days, and then we almost got this new wave of clients that came in who were really, they wanted to move fast. They were really, high intent, had capital ready to move, and basically they had to switch online. They didn't have the systems or the processes set up, so we had to build this software for them. So for us, 2020 actually ended up being our best year ever in terms of new business. We just exploded, but we were running all paid social ads primarily on Facebook and LinkedIn that I was managing at the time, and we skyrocketed because of it. And the reason that I'm kind of alluding to this, and what I guess the direction I'm heading with this is, right now we're in a recession, especially in the US right now. Like, it's a scary time. We were talking beforehand, kind of before we pressed record. It's a bloodbath over here with, marketers getting laid off, marketing budgets getting slashed. All these tech companies are just, it's a scary, scary time. What's your take on that at the moment, and how confident are you in kind of the next 12 months? What plans are you putting in place to make sure you're being successful?
Very good question. I think, trying to diagnose the landscape and the kind of economic climate, I think it goes without saying, whatever is going to happen, it's going to be choppy. I think there's going to be a bit of a recovery. It's probably going to go back down again, and it'll probably recover a little bit again. I don't see it just going all the way down, and there probably will be a global recession, but I think that word almost has too much power because, it just means negative growth. It isn't like, oh, you just stop what you're doing and no one has a job when you're in a recession. And similar to the kind of COVID example, the people that rolled up their sleeves said, well, I can't just not work. We had furlough schemes in the UK. The people that went, well, I'm not just going to sit on my arse all day and do nothing, ended up creating opportunities for themselves, creating new business, creating new businesses, leveraging opportunities, whether that was online or offline or arbitrage opportunities. Like, those sorts of people will also do well, whatever the economic climate is. So I think, trying to forecast is going to be difficult. I think for me, it's about staying consistent, staying positive, doing all the little things, not kind of cutting corners, which I think certainly from like a brand awareness perspective, I think is going to happen. I think there is a huge opportunity for a lot of businesses in pretty much every vertical to steal market share because those awareness budgets are getting slashed. And that's fine. You know, that might be a strategic cash flow decision that, you know, you can't, I'm not going to argue with CFOs about that. But actually, if you're advertising way less, or you're just focused on, say, conversion only campaigns and are really just battering that kind of lower funnel sort of acquisition tactic, then someone's going to be able to, you know, hit prospects. Someone that is going to be able to take, you know, a user on that journey. And actually, you know, in a couple of years' time, however long this recession lasts for, you know, business-wise, you might have stayed afloat and that was a good decision. But certainly market share-wise is going to go to the people that are aggressive and do leverage their resources in the right way. So, yeah, I think, be consistent, I think, is the only thing that you can do. And, you know, all the basic soft skills, you know, be good to people, be polite, put yourself out there, you know, do good work. At the end of the day, they're the only things that have worked for me.
So it was a good answer. I'm just curious, kind of on your side, like how you're planning for, you know, getting through this recession. Like, I mean, for instance, with Catalyst, and for us, it's about the narrative. You know, really, that's what we've seen, and we've seen that, you know, not only with our clients, but also with, you know, potential clients. Like, we're busier now than we ever have been, and the reason for that is that the narrative that I'm putting out there to potential clients is everybody's laying off marketers right now. These are $150,000, $200,000 a year positions. We can come in for a third of that, and we can handle all of that workload for you. And when you lay off directors of demand, when you lay off these positions, it's not like the workload disappears. Somebody still has to do this. So if you want your team to be there in 6 months, you can't just give that job to them because they're going to burn out. Then you're going to be even more of a shitstorm than you're in right now. So that narrative for us has been extremely effective, at least in the last 3 to 4 months, of you want to work with an agency right now because we are a specialist in this. We only handle demand generation. So if you want to work with somebody as a demand generation, instead of hiring somebody, and we've actually reached out to people that are posting jobs, this has been one of our most successful campaigns, we're reaching out to people that are hiring and saying, before you spend $150,000 a year on that person, think about doing it for a third of that and working with a specialist agency, and because then you can reinvest that into growth. And then when we talk about the ways that you can actually run the campaigns, what we saw, as soon as there was this concern of a recession, basically we have demand generation, we have demand capture, which is basically paid social and then like Google ads and Bing ads. So first thing everybody does is shift it all into Google ads because they want to get clients as quick as possible. Everybody does that. There's less people buying. Competition goes through the roof. So customer acquisition cost goes through the roof and there's less demand there to be captured. But what nobody does is then focus on the demand generation, so paid platforms like LinkedIn, like Facebook, these paid social channels where we can invest now with CPMs. I mean, we're seeing with LinkedIn right now CPMs that would rival Facebook 12 months ago, which is nuts. We've got clients right now with $15 to $20 CPMs, which you didn't see on LinkedIn a year ago. And there's this enormous opportunity where if you work with an agency that gets this the right way and you can be aggressive, and that's kind of the narrative that we've been putting out there is we're an aggressive agency. I'm an aggressive person with that. Like, I like to go after growth. Like, I'm not going to sit there and just kind of like, hopefully we'll be here in a year's time. Like, we're going to be here in a year's time and we're going to continue to accelerate and grow on other agencies in our space, specifically like US-based demand generation agencies. There's a reason that we're catching up with them so quickly right now. And it's that whole philosophy and mentality that you have. And that's what I'm trying to push out to as many marketers are looking to make this leap, where if you've just been laid off right now and you're sitting there going, I can't get a job because no one's hiring, that's a huge opportunity to go and start your agency. That's why I genuinely believe now is the best time to start a digital marketing agency that there's been, because it's only going to get worse in terms of the economy, which means it's only going to become a bigger and bigger opportunity for you. It's just a question of whether you start now or you wait 6 months to start. But if I were you, you start today. In 6 months' time, you can have 3 or 4 clients and you can be really rolling with getting this figured out and learning how to grow a scalable and profitable agency.
Yeah, love it. I mean, to be honest, I don't even have anything to add to that. I couldn't agree more. I think, like you say, it's an attitude. You can't say, oh, poor me, I've been laid off. Oh, poor me, you know, this thing's happened. Like the people that did well out of COVID, that did well out of the last recession, you know, I think we all sort of now eye roll at the meme of all the the unicorns that came out of the 2008 recession. But there's a reason for that. You know, people had to be scrappy, and good ideas, you know, good ideas are a dime a dozen. But actually, it comes to people rolling up their sleeves, working hard, you know, applying themselves and trying to execute on that idea. And if there's the second best option, like a job, it's not available. Like you have to be 100% accountable to provide for you and your family. And running an agency is certainly a good way to do that.
That's for me. It's the responsibility to provide for your family it's the financial independence you get from starting an agency. And I've had this conversation with a lot of men and a lot of women who are the breadwinners for their family, and they're saying, hey, I was making $150,000 a year, I've just been laid off. My wife, my husband, they don't make that. They're not in a position where we can rely on that one, salary. Like, what would you do if you were me? I'd say I'd go and get 4 clients right now. Like, that would be my best advice. Go and get 4 clients and figure it out, because once you learn to get 1 client, it's repeatable. It's not, if you don't have this referral network coming in, referrals are great, but they're not scalable. You're never going to rely exclusively on referrals. They're very, the ebbs and flows of referrals, they come in, not every referral is great, that's going to get, referred onto you. Some referrals you have to turn down, and then you could piss off who's ever referring them. So relying solely on referrals, it's not a great option. You have to learn to go out and prospect and sell and acquire clients yourself. And for most digital marketers who are in the paid social space, they only know how to acquire customers with paid social. But if you just got laid off, you're not going to spend $5,000 or $10,000 a month on Facebook ads out of your own pocket. Everybody's terrified to do that. So how do you learn to sell and go and do that? And that, for me, is the biggest caveat to starting an agency, is once you figure that out, the world's your oyster at that point. I mean, you can literally scale to whatever size you want. And we were talking, kind of before this about, how we want to grow both of our agencies and kind of why we both chosen more of the kind of solopreneur route with that. And instead of building like a huge workforce, it's just not something that either of us particularly desire. But if you learn how to acquire clients, systematically, you can scale out to any point that you want to.
Yeah, without a doubt. And some of this is more of a lifestyle choice. That I think the focus is what makes me happy, what interests me, what projects do I actually want to get my teeth stuck into. And rather being on a call, for me personally, being very bang average at Google ads or LinkedIn ads, it's hey, I'm involved in really high level conversations where I'm learning things from really top tier marketers or top tier agencies, because I'm seen as that from a Facebook perspective. And I get a real buzz out of that, because instead of just going, we can do everything, we're okay at everything, it's just not how I've ever wanted to be in my life. It's if you're going to do something, do it properly and do it to the best of your ability. So yeah, I think, being that kind of solopreneur, having a flexible lifestyle, invested in time in, multiple different projects and things that, really stimulate you and, get you out of bed in the morning. That for me is what happiness looks like. It's absolutely not for everyone, but it's worked for me for the last sort of 5 or 6 years.
We're going to take a quick moment to pause this episode and thank our sponsors. Firstly, we've got the first sponsor, which is True Classic, the clothing company. As you all know from all of my content, I've been wearing True Classic for the last 18 months, and it truly is the staple of my wardrobe. What I find is that a lot of the clothes that I buy previously were all too baggy, they didn't fit right. The best part about True Classic, not only is it incredibly soft, but for those of you that have broader shoulders, that have larger arms, who just tend to be a little bit more athletic, the fit is absolutely amazing. It makes you look great, and a lot of people call these really the push-up bras for guys. I can tell you, when you wear these t-shirts, you look good. If you're interested in trying True Classic, there's going to be a link in the description of this episode. There's going to be my personal link, or you can go to trueclassics.com/thechrisroach. Go ahead, check out the store. I guarantee you will not be sorry if you start wearing True Classics. If you do end up purchasing them, please let me know what you purchased. I'm curious to hear feedback. Moving on to our second sponsor, which is the Independent Marketer, which is an online course and community that I've created to be able to teach digital marketers how to go out and break out of the golden handcuffs and ultimately launch either their own freelancing career or build it into their own digital marketing agency. In the description is going to be a link to that course. And as a thank you for listening to this podcast, there's going to be a special $100 discount on that course as well. If you do have any questions on that, please feel free to reach out to me directly or shoot me a message on LinkedIn. Back to the episode. So you've discussed why you ultimately went that solopreneur, one-man shop road and kind of why you've decided to stay with that as you've obviously grown. Have there been points where you've thought it would be nice to have the community side of, having employees, building that culture rather than necessarily, being by yourself? And have you found, have you got lonely doing that? Is there anything that you perhaps could reflect back on that you would have changed?
Good question, and there was probably a couple of different questions in that, so I'll try and answer that best I can. For me, TWH Media-wise, no, there's not been kind of any appetite to grow it as a proper agency. For me, from a sense of accomplishment, I felt like I kind of did everything I wanted to and more at Social Chain. That was, a kind of best-in-class agency for a while. The growth stories, the types of clients, the high-paced nature of it, I kind of, ticked off my bucket list, if you like, from that. With regards to sort of getting lonely, I think something that I've tried to do and really put a precedent on is trying to sort of cultivate, friends in the space, in other spaces that are entrepreneurial, and been able to, talk to them about the trials and tribulations of running your own business. And, you kind of sort of drift to those sorts of people that, you can then, not whine about, but actually can empathize with you when you're having a difficult day, or what, how to deal with a certain client scenario or a cash flow problem, or those sorts of things. So I've never personally been lonely, but one of the reasons for that is, for me, the agency has always been a great cash flow business. It's something that, I take a lot of like pride in, and being, really good at what I do. But at the same time, it's about, investing in other projects. It's about, TrueFan, which is now known as Surf, that was a tech company co-founded in Canada that I'm part of. I've invested in a restaurant. I'm part of a couple of different crypto projects. I'm so excited and interested by so many different projects. It's not just my day-to-day is just agency. Because if I think it was, I wouldn't necessarily get bored, but it wouldn't necessarily fulfill me like my kind of current work-life balance is. So yeah, hopefully that kind of does a good job of answering those couple.
Yeah, no, and I think it's fascinating that you're leveraging the income and the profit from the agency side to then invest into other projects, because that's something that, I've experienced that as well in ways where it's, you hit a certain amount in revenue per month. There's only so much you can spend. And there's only so much you want to spend, and like once you get past that, it's kind of like, do you just stack it and keep it? Do you put it into a retirement fund? Do you invest it? Like, what do you want to do with that? And like right now, like we've kind of gone more of my wife and I, we've gone more of the rental property road. So we bought a house, we're now renting that out. We're looking at getting a second one in the next couple of months and be able to rent that out as well. Like that for us is ways to be able to continue to kind of diversify basically. But that's something that, again, a lot of agency owners, when they start off, the goal is to make, it seems to be like a magic number. It's like once you make 10,000 a month, like everyone seems to be pretty comfortable at that point. But once you make 20 or 30 or 40, if you don't have a big team, like what are you going to do? Like that's for me, like I actually made that mistake very early on. Like we scaled very, very aggressively in the first, I'd say 9 months, and we got to that kind of 40, 50,000 a month, but I was working so many hours, and I was like, I started to burn out, and I was like, right, I got to dial this back. Like this is not what I signed up for. And for me, that additional income, it didn't move the needle on my happiness. So I was like, what's the point? Like, and that's where, and that's a lesson that I talk with a lot with agency owners on right now who are starting off, that make that 10,000, like, at this rate, we'll hit 50 by Christmas. Before you do that, just think about what that actually entails in terms of the workload. How do you balance that, that work-life balance right now? What advice would you have for someone that is scaling, who maybe has that, not the naivety, but they have that hunger and that appetite? Because I feel like as soon as you start doing it, it becomes addictive to try and find new clients. Like, what advice would you have for someone who's more of a seasoned marketing agency owner?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it really does depend on the individual. I know you're married. I've been with my partner 7 years, like very settled. We have a house, a dog. Like I've, been on all the holidays, bought all the flashy watches, cars, things like that. And, actually, I really like a lot of that shit. And actually, I think it's some of those sort of customer journeys with those products I actually find really interesting. But like you say, you can have a very kind of pragmatic financial retirement, for you guys in the US, putting into like a Roth IRA and Vanguard and stuff like that. In the UK, we have, a pretty solid kind of pension scheme, certainly as a business owner. So you've kind of got your basic things. And then for me, it's investing in things that interest me. Like, I have no experience in running a restaurant. I have no experience in investing in a restaurant. But the opportunity came to me because it was a previous client. It's someone that I knew. And it just aligned. It just interested me. It's going to be an Argentinian concept. It was something that I just thought, that is really cool. As a customer, I would love to go there. Let's get involved. And, at the end of the day, it could fail. And actually, percentage-wise, it might fail. But the journey, the learnings, the people that I'll get to meet, the excitement that I'll get from that is, for me, what life is about. And so that again, has worked well for me. I'm also, I think I would say I'm averagely ambitious. Like, I've seen, I've got millionaire, and I've actually got a couple of billionaire friends, or at least friends of friends. And like, these guys with stupid amounts of wealth are not particularly happy. They're looking to safeguard their money. That, the amount of risks that they have, like security dangers, like there's a lot of problems that come, Jay-Z said more money, more problems. Like, do you know what I mean? That is true to an extent. And so, yeah, like, absolutely, you can scale to that point. But if it's to the detriment of your health and happiness, in my opinion, it's not worth it. But I'm sure there's guys that are capable of working, 90 hours every week. Saw a really good interview with, I think it's Harry Stebbings, which is the 20VC. And so he's, from like £16, he's now got, I think it's a £24 million fund. And he said on his podcast that he's worked every Saturday and Sunday for the last 6 years. Now, to me, I would hate that. Like, do you know what I mean? I work on weekends a little bit, but I'm not in the office for 6 hours on a weekend. No chance. Like, that is not what happiness looks like to me. But to him, he even says in this interview, he's like, that is what it takes in my industry for someone with no qualifications and no background and no capital at that time to differentiate themselves, to create the content, to put in the time. And it is that balance. Like, for me, I'm sure there'll be periods of time where I am working 80, 90 hours a week because I've got exciting projects on, there's things that need delivering, and I'm energized by that. But that I am so aware that is not something I can do for 3, 6, 12 months straight. And it's not something I want to be able to do. But, that's how I'm wired. I'm not saying that's the way that you have to be. I'm just saying, like, I think some of the self-discovery, certainly when you spend time on your own, if you're traveling, if you're, just really trying to evaluate, certainly on a yearly basis, what are the levers that you pull in that make you happy. For me, I've realised that over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, you don't get that on day one. And I'm just not interested in having, 200k a month and never seeing any of my family or friends. Like, just not interested.
It seems to be a journey that every successful agency owner goes through, because I think, like you say, it's something that you realise as you start being successful. Because at the beginning, it's so exciting that you just want to go and find as many clients and you want to hit those $10, $20, $50,000, a month revenue goals. But it seems to be something that you kind of, over time, you realise it's not as important as you kind of once thought. And you said, that's not something that, you perceive as happiness. So what is happiness to you with your business?
Yeah, I suppose I've tried to describe that. I think, like the agency itself is a great cash flow business. It's a great opportunity to work with great people on great projects, whether that's scaling brands, whether that's spending, between probably this year, probably in that kind of 10 to 12 mil mark. In previous years, it's been well over sort of 20 million and consulted on a hell of a lot more. Now, like, from a numbers perspective, like, my business has gone down. Like, that for a lot of people would be, petrifying, and I'm not going to lie, it's something nice, but at the same time, like, again, I've got other interests, I've got other investment vehicles, I've got other projects that are taking up my time that, are really exciting me, that I'm proud of, that I want to be involved in, and that for me is what happiness looks like. I think, as I mentioned at the start, like, I'm super into sport and wanted to be a sports journalist. Like, if you told me now I'm only going to be able to work on sport clients or one client for the rest of my life, I'd get bored. Like, do you know what I mean? Because I love the stimulation, the excitement, and the different challenges that different businesses and verticals and budgets, come up. 200, 300 grand a month budget is really different to a 10k a month budget. Doesn't mean that, like, one is either harder than the other. There's just different levers that you can pull. There's different optimization tactics. There's different, things and levels of creative that you even have. And that day to day really keeps me going. Every morning when I check my ad accounts, that's what still kind of excites me. It's not just like, accounting or something where it feels monotonous and you do the same thing every day. For me, I love that, waking up and knowing that there's going to be a couple of different challenges in my day.
Yeah, absolutely. You alluded to earlier on that, you've been there, you bought the cars, you bought the watches. It brought you obviously a certain amount of happiness with that. I hope this question isn't kind of too soon on the conversation we had before, and obviously feel free to give context to that comment as well. The car, for instance, and I'll let you, describe the car just for people listening. When you say you invested in a car, I think perhaps people aren't maybe envisioning what we're talking about here. Has that been an investment for you? Has that brought you business? Obviously you have a certain image that you portray on social media, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. Like, how important is that for you to be able to attract business? And, just specifically like the car, is that an investment or is that more of a toy?
It's probably a bit of both. I think, so for context, when I was 26, I bought a brand new Lamborghini Huracan Evo. I had the best customer journey anyone could ever have. I went in on my birthday, I spec'd the car with them, and then they flew us out to the factory to go see it being made. The month before I got my car, we flew out to a trip in Livigno, which is in the Italian Alps, and we were racing Auruses, STOs, and Hurricanes around a frozen lake, learning how to drift. So like that, a dream come true, and whether I, do really well in the future or go broke, those memories, those experiences, and those connections will be there forever. And so it was a bit of everything. For one thing, similar to the States, where we live, I need a car. I like cars. It was an investment because the people that you meet and the circles that you can then associate yourself with, the opportunities that are unlockable in those, all it would take is if I sign one client from that car, it pretty much pays for itself, which is pretty crazy. And it's also quite likely over a 4 or 5 year span. If I, sign 1 or 2 clients, it's paid for. And then also it's the enjoyment. Like I think, for me, life's about enjoying it. And also, we don't have a family yet. It's a case of like, people with kids will know how expensive children are. If you think there's a 27-year-old that doesn't have a young family and has, a decent amount of disposable income, where do you want to spend that? I'm absolutely still investing in a lot of different places, but the car really does provide me with a hell of a lot of enjoyment. And I think one of the big things I've discovered is it allows me to be grateful. And I think being the ability to be grateful and sort of preach that on a daily basis is a big sort of lever when it comes to being happy. It's pretty hard to kind of think of yourself in a shanty town or in the middle of India, like living in poverty, because that's so far disconnected to where we come from. But at the same time I didn't come up with any of these toys, any of these things. I did not have this life, but I've been able to create it for myself. When I look at that steering wheel or hear the engine turn on, that puts a smile on my face. And for me, that's worth the money. I would say 90% of the people I speak to probably would say it's stupid. But at the end of the day, it makes me, 1% happier a day. And that's more than enough for me.
Awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, so it's a cool story. I've always wanted to ask that kind of whether it was an investment. And like you say, it's such a unique... It's such a unique component, though, of, there's not a lot of agency owners that drive around a Lamborghini. And from what I understand, there's not too many Lamborghinis in Manchester. So in terms of, being able to differentiate yourself, I mean, that's an enormous, differentiating factor, and obviously brings a lot of attention to you because of that. So I've always kind of want to know like how that has kind of weighed in with bringing on potential clients and if that has attracted any, new clients.
Yeah, it definitely has. And I think, one of the things that, whether this is right or wrong, I've been pretty lucky to do quite well for quite a long time. And, when people are asking you, and I've certainly had doubters over the years, when people ask how you're doing, I'm doing great. Yeah, things are good. Thanks for asking, how are you? And normally try and ask, I'm definitely a listener rather than a talker, because I think you can get a lot more value that way. But the car was a nice thing of just being like, no, I'm good. I know what I'm doing here. Like, it's not necessarily like a badge of honor, and I potentially shouldn't look at it like this because a car really isn't the be all and end all. But it was a nice little marker of like, hey, like, I'm not out here disclosing what I'm earning or what I've been earning for the last sort of six years. But we've got a nice house, I've got a nice car, I've got a couple of nice watches. We're doing okay, and that's as much of a status symbol as I need it to be. It's really not all about that, but it's enough to kind of be there and gets you in some of those rooms and applies that little layer of validation where someone previously might have gone, oh, who's this kid in this room? What's he done? The nice thing for me, because of my background, because of the 330 under 30s, the 42 under 40, do you know what I mean? All these kind of like other validation points, that the car's what gets their interest. And then they go, oh, shit, this kid's been doing this for years. Like, oh, actually, he knows what he's talking about. And that's how you convert. No one really cares about the car, but it gets them interested for that half a second. And then, you be yourself, you convert them in various different ways. So that's how I've had the journey anyway. And yeah, it's nicer to have something that, makes you smile every morning than, something that doesn't.
Yeah, it's almost a social proof when you're, especially if you're doing a lot of business in person. I can only imagine turning up in a Lamborghini, ultimately helps with the social proof of almost the validity of, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. Like this isn't his first time doing this. And like you say, being someone that's mid-20s, and I've always been very fortunate because I've been able to grow a beard since I was like 14. So people have always thought I was mid-30s since I was about 18. So it's been and you know this for those listening, we went to high school together. We were in the same same year in school and grew up in the same kind of friendship group. And I've literally always had a beard. So people have always thought I was a lot older than I was. That for me has always been kind of that validity of people just think I'm mid-30s. And again, since I was literally 21, people thought I was mid-30s. So they're always amazed when I'd say, hey, I'm 24, 25, like my first companies. Now I'm 28. Now I'm actually getting towards that kind of 30. So now it's getting a little close and a little real. But again, it just kind of provides that validity of, all right, like they're not a kid that's doing this. Like they actually know what they're doing.
Yeah, and that validity is built in loads of different ways. It's not just about awards and items. And I think for me, as like a sales tactic, as an agency owner, and this also comes down to like speaking on stage. I was at Gary Neville's university on Monday talking about this. Is like you can learn so many things by great salespeople and great presenters, but it's really difficult to just copy them and try and emulate them. You can take little pieces of people, but then put it in your own way. So for example, like I naturally try and speak really quickly. I just get excitable. Now, for some people, they might find that really annoying, but others have told me that actually they like the passion that I have when I actually speak. Other things, trying to copy, say, someone like Gary Vee, like it's just not doable for someone like myself. Like I'm not Gary Vee, but I can talk, I can take, or I really like how much content Gary Vee puts out there. I like the way that he uses his hand, or I like his passion, or I like the fact that he responds in these certain ways. And instead of just going, I want to be Gary Vee, or I want to be Steve Bartlett, I go, ooh, I like what they do. How can I incorporate that in my more organic, authentic self? And that from like a sales cycle and running a business and, to be honest, just operating in a high level kind of world has massively paid dividends, because no one goes, he's just trying to do that. I am unapologetically myself. But over the years, I've stolen loads and loads of little things off, hopefully really smart people.
Yeah, that's great advice for those that are especially investing in your personal brand, which for me, I doubled down on about 2 years ago, literally when I first started Catalyst, and the growth you experience from that is phenomenal. It's such an investment. It's such a way to reap the rewards. As long as you're looking at it as a long-term investment and happy to sit there for 6 to 12 months and accept the fact you're going to be creating content for the first 6 months and it's not going to result in anything, if you can get through that mental block, investing in a personal brand is, one of the best things I think any marketer can do to be able to kind of first, establish themselves as a thought leader.
Without a doubt. And yeah, whether it's in this life or another life, like that personal brand, you wouldn't believe the amount of opportunities that unlocks. Like you don't know what people are saying behind closed doors. And, by being able to differentiate yourself, being able to keep yourself front of mind and also just like convey what you're about really, really helps. Like not only, sometimes the selling can be done before you get in a room. I think I remember when we were working with Shoe and like they emailed back like, oh yeah, no, we know exactly who Tim is. Like, would love to work with you. And it was just like, whoa, like I didn't think my personal brand was big or like transcended anything or, do you know what I mean? There's these crazy little moments like, oh yeah, no, we know who you are. Like, oh no, we saw you at Social Chain or we saw you talk on stage here, and you're like, it really hits home. Like this thing does travel and really is worthwhile. And those moments, it's kind of nice to hear.
Yeah, it is. I will say I always have a little chuckle when I get on a sales call with someone and I'll say, hey, like, nice to meet you. And they're like, oh yeah, we follow you on LinkedIn. Done deal. This is already closed. Don't worry about it. Where should I send the contract to? It's always like a little thing in my head. I'm like, great, this is going to be a much easier conversation as opposed to other sales calls I've got. And then like, who are you? I'm like, you booked a call with me. Like, what do you mean? Who am I? Like, this is not the way business is done. So it does definitely make a difference when you are, looking to close deals, especially if you're looking through that pretty consistently. Hey Tim, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. We are kind of coming up on our time here. The final question that I do want to ask, for those that have enjoyed this episode, those that have kind of loved, what you've been talking about, where can they find more information on you? Where can they follow along? And if anybody is particularly interested in working with you, how can they reach out?
Yeah, at Tim Will Hyde on Instagram. Reach out on LinkedIn is probably the best channel. So yeah, Tim Hyde on there. If anyone's got any questions, reach out to myself or Chris. Always happy to respond on those channels. So yeah, thanks so much for having us, dude, and lovely to see how well you're doing. Very jealous of your digital nomad lifestyle now.
And that concludes this episode. If you have any questions, please head into the comments where you'll find all of the available links. If you have any questions on our sponsors, all the links will be in the description. Please stay tuned for the next episode.